and I'm also going to transcribe this. Okay, let's see how that works. Okay, let me see how I can move that. Okay, so we begin with our opening prayers. So I can screen share that. Okay. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Om Dagla Dang War Je Pe Dra No Par Je Pe Geg Tar Pa Dang Tam She Ken Pe Bar Du Jo Par Je Pa Tam She Ki So Je Pe Manam Ka Dam Yam Pe Sem Chen Tam She De Wa Dang Den Dog now dang drel nor du la na yang dag par zog pe zhang zhu bun po she to pa ja. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I take refuge. And thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. De she du sang ma ge gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Ma she bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Du de ring ne song te ni ma sang ta sam gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Next prayer we'll go to will be the short refuge prayer. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye cho dang so ki cho nam la, shang shu bar du dagni kab su chi, dagi jin so ki pe so nam gi, dro la pen shir sangye ju pa shok. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity free from attachment and aversion. May all mothers, sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pe sem chen tam she de wa dang de we gu dang dem pa jur chi. Dug now dang de now gi gu dang dra wa jur chi. Dug now me pe de wa dang mi dra wa jur chi. Ne ring chak dang ni dang dra wei tang nam la ne pa jur chi. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I know tonight is the eve of the Losar, which is the Tibetan New Year. So many people are getting ready for that. There's people down at the Dharma Surya Center in Virginia that are getting ready for that. So that's why a few people aren't with us, and plus other people are traveling and they're not going to be with us. So, but if you get a chance, if you can, either tomorrow there'll be celebration there'll be prayers at Dharma Surya at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then through the week, each day there'll be special prayers each morning at 10 o'clock. And then on Saturday is a smoke offering and flag raising. So everybody will go outside. There'll be lots of people there. There'll be lots of Tibetan people will be there. And we put up new flags around the building and so on. So it's quite a festive time. There'll be food there, and everybody will be welcome if you can manage to come on up if you live nearby. If you live further away and there's other Tibetan Dharma centers, I'm sure there'll be celebrations there too if you had a chance to go to any of those. So tonight I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to do a Manjushri practice, but before we get there, I just wanted to have a talk. Tonight is the 7th of our 8-week cycle, so I wanted to talk about the what is called the 3 baskets of teachings. So when the Buddha began to teach, that his teachings were in 3 baskets. They may have been running at the same time, but certain people would hear certain teachings at any given time. So it's broken down into these 3 groups, or these 3 baskets. So the first group is called the Vinaya basket. And the Vinaya are the rules, is the discipline, the organization, the basic organization of the sangha, of the monastics, of the practitioners, the people, and so on. So these are the different rules that are set forth by the Buddha in order to discipline ourselves, to prepare ourselves to be a proper vessel, to purify ourselves, to become virtuous, etc., to become a proper vessel, to be able to receive the teachings, and then to be able to assimilate them into your lifestyle and have them be wholesome, remain wholesome, and not contaminated by negativity, by confusion, by unwholesome deeds that we might engage in, and so on. So these Vinaya teachings are called in the tradition is called the Hinayana teachings. That's Hinayana, Hinayana. So yana is a word that means vehicle. So there's these 3 vehicles. So you'll see the Hinayana is the first, is this Vinaya teaching, and this is the discipline. You can imagine 2,600 years ago when Buddha Shakyamuni was teaching, traveling from village to village, most of his followers were some kind of miscreants of one type or another, doing negative things, non-virtuous things. And so the first thing he realized, the first thing that the Buddha taught was that for these beings to be able to prepare themselves, they need to be able to stop doing those things. So he had to give them a sense of responsibility for discipline. So one of the things that they would do was be to shave their heads, because a lot of the things that we do, or a lot of things that were being done on the side of vanity, on the side of desire, and so on. So when you shave your head, there's this natural feeling that everybody's the same. You're shaving your head, and there's less to be proud about. So that was one of the things that the Buddha did to instill discipline. A second thing that he did was that everybody was to wear robes. Everybody was to wear the same kind of robes, very simple robes, get rid of their normal clothing and so on. And this way, again, they were overcoming their pride, overcoming jealousy, because to want to have what somebody else had, didn't mean anything because everybody had the same thing. So these were two devices that the Buddha taught in order to help people to prepare themselves to be able to receive the teachings. Another thing he did was to teach celibacy, to be a celibate, to not engage in sexual activity and so on, because this promotes a lot of desire, of course, and a lot of lust and a lot of passion and a lot of confusion along with that. And a lot of covetedness, wanting to be with somebody else or not wanting to have your partner, be with somebody else. So he taught celibacy as being an integral part of this discipline. So these were for the monastics, and then to take vows. So the basic vows were to not kill anyone, was to not to lie, was not to steal, was not to drink, or was not to engage in wrong sexual activity. So those were the main precepts that everybody had to take. And then those who became monastics had several more precepts that they had to take, vows that they had to take, and say that they were going to discipline themselves in this way. And then they became eligible to be able to receive more teachings from the Buddha. Most of the teachings were given to everybody, whether they were monastic or lay people, whatever. But a lot of the teachings were given to those who were of a higher awareness level, yogis and yoginis, bodhisattvas, as well as other Buddhas, spiritual beings, and so on. So as I said in the beginning, he's giving these teachings, but the ordinary people would hear the ordinary level of teachings, the monastics would hear another level, and then these meditational deities would hear yet another level. And so they were all interconnected, but it's what you were prepared for that you could hear. So that was the first of the three baskets, where it was the Vinaya teachings, or the Hinayana. The second was the Mahayana. Maha, Mahayana. So Maha means great, and Yana is vehicle. So it's the great vehicle. And this became the middle way teachings. This was the Sutra teachings. So the Buddha was giving all these teachings, and they were memorized by many of the people coming. And they weren't written down for several hundred years after the Buddha passed away. And but he would repeat these teachings over and over again. And many of the disciples were very, very intelligent, and they would hear these things, hear the teachings, and they would memorize them. And then after the Buddha passed, then they would kind of compare their memorization with each other, and they would kind of refine what they would say, because say, oh, I missed that word, or oh, I missed that thought or something. So it became a purification of what people were remembering. And then they were written down in the Pali language. The language that this was taught in was the Sanskrit language, but it didn't have a written language at that time. It didn't have an alphabet or anything, but the Pali language had already formed, and so these teachings were committed to the Pali language by these Indian monastics from India. So, so these were called the sutras. The sutras are like the Gospels, and the Western and the Bible and so on. The literal words of the teacher. The Gospels were of Jesus, and here the sutras were by the Buddha. And some were considered to be some of the masters that came after him that were at the level of the Buddha, because there were many Buddhas that came after Shakyamuni Buddha. So he wasn't the only Buddha. There were many Buddhas that came after him, and many of those teachings were brought into the sutra, the canon of the sutra teachings. So in these teachings was a couple of important concepts or ideas. One was that this was the middle way, because there were extremes. There was extremes of nihilism on one side and the extreme of eternalism on the other side. And then there was another extreme set where there was extreme of egoism or individualism on one side, and opposite that was materialism or substantialism. So these extremes, you see, there was this middle way of being able to look at all these things, and not with the extreme views, to be able to look at it in the middle way, because there was a relative truth of all these things. There was a relative way of being able to process this, to be able to view these things. And to go to any of the extremes meant that you were losing sight of the wisdom of what might have been that other side of those teachings, which were had meaning, had a sensibility about them to human beings. So because of that, we wanted to be able to not shut ourselves off, but to be able to bring them onto the path, to be able to learn about them, to understand them, to find the validity of this middle way. So this was part of the Mahayana. This was part of the middle way. So another part of this was the teaching of bodhicitta. So bodhicitta is two Sanskrit words. Bodhi means enlightenment, and chitta means the heart, the heart, the heart mind. So this is the brain mind, this is the heart mind, this is the big mind, and this is the little mind. So the bodhicitta is the big mind, the holy enlightened mind. So these bodhicitta teachings had a relative meaning to them and had an ultimate meaning to them. So it was incumbent upon the students to be able to learn and experience the relative, to understand the meaning of the relative, and also to experience and learn the meaning of the ultimate. So this was introduced during this time of the Mahayana teachings, of the bodhicitta teachings. So the hero of this time was called the Bodhisattva. Bodhi means enlightenment. Sat is a being, and Va is a holy being. A sattva would be a holy being. So it's the Bodhisattva, the holy enlightened being, who is on the path to becoming a Buddha. Not quite a Buddha, but more than an ordinary being, more than just a practitioner, more than even a yogi or a yogini. A bodhisattva is on the path to purify oneself, the last vestiges of non-virtue, unwholesomeness, confusion, while on the path. So it's a holy enlightened being. They were enlightened, but they weren't fully enlightened. They weren't fully realized at this point. So the bodhisattva was introduced at this time, that this was someone who was following the bodhisattva path, the bodhicitta. The hallmark of the bodhisattva was that the motivation for the bodhisattva was for the enlightenment of other beings, and not for selfish motivation, for one's own enlightenment. That was in the Hinayana. For one's own enlightenment was in the Hinayana. And the hero there was called the Arhat, A-R-H-A-T. Also in Sanskrit would be called the Shravaka. And you've seen that in some of the prayers that we recite. The Shravaka would be the Arhat. So the Arhat would be a monastic who would go off into a cave or into a hermitage of some type underneath a tree in the woods or whatever, and would do the practices, do the meditations to attain enlightenment. But again, it was a selfish enlightenment. It wasn't an enlightenment to help other beings. These arhats, these shravakas, had compassion for the suffering of other beings, but they weren't dedicated to it. They didn't take a vow to be able to help these beings. The bodhisattva, on the other hand, did. So they became the hero of the time. So these bodhisattvas. So this was all part of the Sutra teachings, the Mahayana.
Lance, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
And this has been a source of confusion for me. The idea that an essential feature of enlightenment is not the desire to help other beings. If I always understood, I thought that I understood to be enlightened, you had joy, compassion, loving kindness, equanimity, all of these things, which certainly implies to me that means helping other people. And I don't see how it is confusing to me how you can be enlightened and not be drawn to help other people as a push of that energy. So how am I getting it wrong?
Well, your introduction to this and our introduction to this has been in the Mahayana. So we don't have the direct experience of entering onto the path at that Hinayana level. We didn't experience it from that. It's still practiced by a huge number of people called the Theravadins. And maybe you've seen pictures of them. They're in Southeast Asia mostly. They're in southern India. They're in Sri Lanka. They're in Burma. They're in Cambodia and Thailand and parts of Vietnam. And they wear the saffron yellow colored robes. And they usually don't have any other dress on. You see their skin because they don't have shirts on because it's warm down there. It's much warmer down there. And they're very simple, very wonderful people, but they are the Theravadins, and it means the teachings of the elders. And this was the primary teaching of the Buddha, was the Hinayana, was the first. And those people followed that. They don't follow the Mahayana. And there is a bit of, I don't know if antagonism is the right word to say, but there's non-agreement that bodhicitta even exists in the Hinayana philosophy. But it does, of course, in the middle way, in the Mahayana. So if you were raised in those areas, if you were brought up in a Hinayana Dharma center, then you wouldn't be hearing about those things. And that the enlightenment of those people was a individual enlightenment. And what the Buddha taught was that you can do that. We need to do that to a degree. But what we find is there's a point where you realize that there's still suffering in the world. And the goal of the Buddha, of Shakyamuni Buddha, was to overcome, to find the answer to the cause of suffering for all beings. But if you find it for yourself, but not share it with other beings, that becomes at cross purposes. And then, so the Buddha then taught the Mahayana, but the Hinayana had already been, been stabilized in many, many, many cultures already who weren't ready to hear about the Bodhisattva Mahayana's part of it. So that's the explanation for it. So we say that, they have gone along the path, they have achieved great levels, but at the same time, they have selfishly done that. And that has kept them back. That has kept them back. And that's why we say in the prayers that we don't want to be reborn as a Shravaka or a Pratyeka Buddha. A Pratyeka Buddha is a solitary realizer, one who has attained a Buddha awareness, but still maintains a selfishness about it and an arrogance about it, instead of being one who goes into the villages and mixes with the people and teaches the Dharma and so on. The Bodhisattva, or rather the solitary realizer, would stay by themselves and say, "Oh, I've realized it," and everybody else has to find it for themselves. So these are cultural divides, if you will, that separate, the Buddhist community in these ways. So that's the answer. Does that make sense? Can you follow that?
That helps.
Okay.
I need to do my own work on that.
Yeah, well, and the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, the first couple chapters talk about that. So
I'll go back to that.
okay.
I have.
Okay. So we talked about the Hinayana, we talked about the Vinaya teachings, which are the Hinayana teachings. We talked about the Sutra teachings, the literal words of the Buddha, the Sutra teachings, which is the Mahayana. And now the third of the basket of the three baskets is called the Abidharma teachings. Abidharma, it's spelled A-B-I Dharma, D-H-A-R-M-A, Abidharma. And these are the the teachings that go beyond. These are the wisdom teachings of the Buddha. So this is the discriminating awareness. So this is what puts one on the path to realize oneself as a Buddha, to live as a Buddha in this lifetime. Not that it's something that is when we die, we become Buddha. It's we become Buddha now. So these Abhidharma teachings are the wisdom teachings, the wisdom teachings of becoming a Buddha. And so there's a, so this is the Buddha mind, articulating the Buddha mind. And these Abhidharma teachings is in the English book of this is a big, thick book. And it's like a book of lists, different lists, all 10 of these and 12 of those and 4 of these and 64 of those and so on. All these things that categorize the all the actions that human beings engage in, but at the level of being a Buddha, the purification of all those actions to be a living Buddha. So this is called the Vajrayana. Vajra spelled Dajra, Yana, Yana, Vajrayana. Vajra means indestructible, indestructible wisdom in this case, Vajrayana. There also is another pseudonym for this is Mantrayana, Mantra, the word mantra, the mantra words that we say, Mantrayana vehicle. So these are the words that the Buddha says, the mantra, the word that the Buddha says. So this Vajrayana, Mantrayana. So this is the wisdom of emptiness. Emptiness is introduced to us in Mahayana. It's introduced to us, but it's not elaborated on, and it becomes a goal, but it doesn't have the wisdom method to be able to learn this and then become the embodiment of that in the Mantrayana. But when we get into the Vajrayana, then there is a more of a more teaching, more practice of this Vajrayana. And this is called the Tantra teachings, Tantra, Tantra. So there's the Sutra, which is the teachings of the Buddha. And then there is the Tantra, which are the practices of the Buddha, actually practicing that wisdom that is taught in the Sutra is practiced in the Tantrayana. So there's Vajrayana is the same as Mantrayana, because that's the speech of the Buddha. And then the Tantrayana is the practice of the Buddha, of being the Buddha. And we practice it in order that we may perfect it. We enter into the sadhanas, we enter into the deity yoga practices, which are allowing ourselves to recognize those qualities within ourselves, those motivations within ourselves. And more that we do those things, more and more we become purer and purer and purer. And then we become the Buddha. We become the embodiment of that wisdom, of that practice, of that experience. Our body, speech, and mind that we talk about in action bodhicitta becomes our lifestyle, becomes the way in which we operate in this lifetime. So this emptiness is a very subtle concept. And it's based on the idea, it's based on that there is a lack of inherent reality. Now, this flies in the face of everything that we know as Western people. It's very hard for us to be able to understand this, and much more difficult to be able to abide in this without losing a sense of purpose and direction. And so because it can have a nihilistic interpretation to it, and that interpretation is false. It is nihilism, that nothing matters, nothing makes any sense, etc. But in this case, they're in this relative existence that we have. We talk about that there's two truths. There is a relative truth. Everything that we look at, everything that we see, everything that we involve ourselves with is relative. The way in which we express it, the way in which we think about it, the way in which we act with it is relative to something else, to not having it. I have this or I don't have this. This is a particular color or it's some other color. This is soft or this is hard. Everything that we do is in a relative sense. Everything that we think of is in a relative sense. And our life is in a relative sense. We think we are permanent. It feels like we are permanent. It feels like that this book is permanent. But we all know that we're going to die. This body is going to decompose and go away. It's going to return to its basic elements. Those basic elements themselves are composites of other things, and they're going to break down. And then what are those other things? Those other things are molecules. And what are the molecules made up? They're made up of atomic structures. And what are the atoms made up of? They're made up of subatomic particles. And what is the subatomic particles but the energy that surrounds the atom, that is locked in each atom, is slowed down to a point that it takes a form. Energy is formless. But if you can slow that energy down, it becomes solid. It becomes a form. It has a form to it. So if you can slow energy down, it becomes light. If you slow those photons, down, it becomes subatomic particles, muons and bosons and all that kind of stuff. I'm not an expert in this, so excuse me for throwing some words around that I can't go into a lot of detail about. But you can read about these, and they talk about the God particle. They're building this gazillion-dollar thing in France and Austria or wherever they're building it, to be able to get to the God particle and so on. This thing that is the bridge between energy and matter. This God particle. So we see that we're all made up of these particles that are just temporary. They're just manifestations of energy that has slowed down to a point where it begins to take a form. So this relative nature, this temporary relative nature, is called the relative truth. This is what we call the relative truth because it's all relative to something else. Ultimately, all this matter is relative to energy. And we can only look at Einstein's theory of relativity, E equals mc squared, which has been proven over and over again. And there are scientists who are trying to find, well, there's this singularity that then takes it into another domain, which in Buddhism, in this philosophy, we would say would be the ultimate reality. There's the relative reality, the relative truth, and then there's the ultimate. And the ultimate is beyond comprehension by human beings. However, it can be experienced. And that's why this philosophy has lasted 2,600 years like it has, because so many people have had this experience. It hasn't been just only experienced by the Buddha. However, it's been experienced by ordinary beings who then develop and recognize that Buddha nature. We call that Buddha, is the awakened one. And it means that we have that within ourselves, and that when we experience that, it's like lighting a light that never goes out. However, that light can be blocked up. That light can be confused with other things. But if we have these skills to be able to remove those blockages, then that light is there. It never went out. It's always been there. So this is the ultimate. This is the ultimate nature or the ultimate truth. So the scientists today are trying to find that singularity that brings the relative truth together with the ultimate truth. And we, as philosophic spiritualists, say, well, it just stays right there. It doesn't have to go any further. And if it does, it's beyond our scope of recognition anyway. And why beat ourselves up trying to find this? All we need to do is experience it, and then we've got it. And all we got to do now is just live it, instead of confusing it and contaminating it with our non-virtue, contaminating it with our confusion, contaminating with the faults that we think are true, our passion, our desire, our lust, our jealousy, the 5 poisons, the 84,000 emotions, the ignorance of our wisdom, of not realizing, and the folly of human beings thinking that they can know this. Who are human beings to think that they can know this? If you go out and you look at the cosmos, or you're out in the cosmos and you're looking back at the earth, why should these puny animal-like beings be the only ones who have this knowledge, this awareness, so we begin to accept the fact that we're human beings and that we need to be able to live in bodhicitta. We need to be able to live in loving kindness for each other. We need to live in compassion for each other. We need to live in joy for each other. We need to live in equanimity for each other. Because as long as we are living in this 3-dimensional life form, that's all we have. So this is the Abidharma. This is what it is. This is the wisdom of the Buddha mind, of being able to sustain that. And here is the book of lists that says, here's what it is. And it's all these different things. But we don't necessarily need to know all of that. We don't need to read all of that. We can experience all that in a flash. And it's a question of whether we are able to remain in that moment of purity, to be able to just live that, to just sustain that. So those are the 3 baskets: the Hinayana, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana, the indestructible vehicle. Once you have that, it's indestructible. You'll never lose it. It may be covered up, like I said a moment ago, but if you can take the time, if you can take a moment and reconstruct whatever it is that you need to do to stabilize your emotions, stabilize your body, and so on, you can be right there because it never left you. So this is what we meditate for. The meditation is a process in which we are developing mindfulness of our relative nature and being able to compartmentalize it and say, okay, I need these things right now. I need these things in my job. I need these things with my family, etc. But now I don't need them right now because I'm going to do a meditation practice. But to do that, I need to have these things. So I have these things that help me to stabilize my practice, to help me to develop my mindfulness or stabilize my mindfulness on what my goal is and so on. And then I'm able to do that. And then I say, now I need to be in this calm, abiding peace of mind, this spaciousness of thought that comes and goes, but we don't attach to the thoughts. The thoughts just come and go. and we don't pay attention. We just let them go. And then we come to the point of being able to examine those thoughts that come up that maybe are what we might call spiritual thoughts, to help us identify what we're trying to do and what our next step is. And then we practice our mindfulness on what it is to generate our Buddha nature, to clear away the negativities, to clear away the obstructions, to be able to generate that Buddha nature within ourselves. And then the completion of that, where we now become no body, no form, no thought. We become just pure meditation. And that gives way all up until that point is all contemplation. But then when that contemplation relaxes, that contemplation is exhausted, then we become in the meditation. And that's the experience that we're talking about. That's when we become in the absolute nature, in the absolute truth. We recognize the absolute truth, and we can see the relative, and we can see the absolute, and we can see that they are part of our mind. And the mind is our vehicle in which we experience all this. So we say the mind of the Buddha, the indestructible mind, the indestructible Vajrayana. So this is what we're learning. So here we're learning the very basic stages of this. Any comments or questions?
When you were talking about the energy, not when it slows down and takes physical form, I was thinking about a river when the water goes into an eddy, or when the water becomes stagnant and things start to grow. It slows the motion, and bacteria and other things grow. I don't know. It was just a visual. It was
Yeah,
interesting. I thank you for that.
yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, there's many harmonics of concept, of visualizing that. And we talk about the similes, and that's how we learn. That's our relative mind. That's our dualistic mind. It's like this, but it's not this. So we see it everywhere.
I have a question, Lance. As it relates to practice, would you say that it's traditionally like a course of someone, even within like a Tibetan Buddhist lineage or something, like practicing more like a Hinayana or maybe Hinayana / Mahayana teachings for a long period of time and having some form of realization, and then entering like a Vajrayana or tantric practices? And then just like from being different kind of contexts with Tibetan Buddhism, it seems like in some contexts, like they'll kind of like jump right into the like Vajrayana or tantric teachings like right from the beginning. Or I know like even like in the beginning when I mean this is probably 12, 13 years ago or something, like I was getting like initiations, like then I didn't know what the hell was going on. I was like initiations in different like tantric deities and practices and stuff. But I guess my question is, should we be focusing on these like Mahayana or like Theravadan or Hinayana type of practices for a long time before doing like Vajrayana practices?
Well, it's a really good question, and the analogy here is like getting a great book and going to the last chapter and reading the last chapter, but not having any clue about what the first chapter was or the introduction or what all the other parts of the book are. Just going to the last chapter and think we can get that.
Yeah.
And that's part of our human nature, particularly in the West. We have that kind of arrogance to think we can do that, get away with that. But
Yeah.
another analogy is that we're building a castle on the beach, in sand. It doesn't have a firm foundation because at some point there's going to be disturbances that are going to rock that castle, and it's going to fall down because it's impermanent, and we're not prepared for that. So so we need to follow the instructions that are in the Lam Rim text. I mean, that's
Mm.
the book, that's the jewel ornament of liberation. That's stages of the path. And there it's taking you from the very beginning all the way through to be able to understand what the Hinayana parts are, what the Mahayana parts are, and what the Vajrayana parts are. Now, it's not broken down in that particular text in those sections like that. But that's where we need the teacher to be able to help us to understand it, to put it in that context for ourselves. So we need a combination of books. We need a combination of great teachers. We need a lineage that starts at a place and goes all the way through without skipping things and so on, for us to be able to develop that and recognize it on our own, because that is our goal for us individually, to be able to attain enlightenment for the sake of the enlightenment of other beings. So there's a process, and that's the Dharma, and being able to avail ourselves of that process.
Last,
So
Yeah.
does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, and what you were saying was definitely something that for sure has held me back before. When I would it's like I'm sure it's just my own temperament or maybe cultural on some level too, where like I always wanted the next thing that's gonna like get my intellect all like geared up and stimulated. And I want to learn about emptiness, and now I want to, read about the 6 yogas of Naropa or something. Meanwhile, like, I'm neurotic and I can, I'm depressed and all that. I just like want to jump to the ending and like the thing that's most exciting or sexy. And like that's part of what has held me back in the past.
No, that's absolutely true. And for most of us, it's the same story. But then we come to a point when we say, you know what, I've been doing this wrong. I need
Hmm.
to stop, and I need to start over again and re-evaluate things.
Hmm.
So it's like taking something apart and then and then and then putting it back together again, finding that there's been parts there that maybe you don't need, or parts that you didn't know where they went, or something like that. And so by going through this process, you then reconstruct it in a stable way, in a firm way, so that when the vicissitudes of life arise, you've got the strength to be able to be resilient and to
Hmm.
not lose your Buddhist principles when things become shaky for you. So that's what we're trying to do. Buddhism 101 is very simply to give you an introduction to the vocabulary, to the basic books, and we can go so far. And then what we all need to do is then to commit ourselves to a deeper experience by way of the Dharma centers, by way of the lamas, the gurus, the teachers, the deeper books, and so on. And now we have an understanding of, of what the menu is. Buddhism 101 kind of gives you a menu, what your choices are. It gives you a table of contents of what that book is. So that's what we're trying to do, and then to encourage everyone to take up the practice themselves, to take up the study themselves.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, is like restarting and realizing into I've a lot of times I've like almost perverted the Dharma, where it's like come into, like, it gets co-opted as almost like a form of entertainment, like it takes on this kind of energy into it or something. But I'm sorry, Gary, I interrupted, I think, when you were about
No,
to say.
that's okay. That's okay. We wanted to finish your thought there. So, yes, Gary, what did you want to mention?
Uh, you and I have been through a lot of these with the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, and I've read it, but in one Buddhism 101 course that you, I must have gotten this from you, it's a little summary, and I'm holding it up, of the
Yes,
Jewel Ornament of Liberation.
I got it right here.
Yeah, of course, I would encourage everyone to read the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. You read it many times, but this is a handy little reference, and I keep this by my bed. And sometimes I just look at it to just try to, because remembering all of this, there's just so much to it. So I think you said you were going to teach certain chapters of the JOL a little later on in the year. But it would be, I would encourage everyone if they could to get this. I can't remember exactly how I got it, but it just had to be through the course.
What is that called, Gary?
It's a pamphlet, and it's a summary of the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. I mean, it's a little reference book. It's just very, very small. You know, the JOL itself is several hundred pages, 600 pages.
Yeah, I think this is the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. This is the translation that we use, and so this
Which
is
I have, but I got this
so
probably.
this is the lamb. This is the lamb rim text. This was the first of them, and then this was a series of outlines of each chapter of the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. So it became a handy, guide to remember the fundamental concepts of each chapter and so on. And it has lists in it and that kind of thing. It has reference points in it. So this, we printed up ourselves, and I can make it available to whomever wants it. But I think it would be, for anyone who's really willing to commit to the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. And this is like a college textbook. It's dry reading. It's not in a prose that tells a story or a narrative. It's very compact and tells the characteristics and blah blah blah. So it has to be seen to be appreciated and read to be known.
Every word has weight.
Yes.
It's not a page turner.
And if anybody is interested, there is 75 hours of page by page, line by line, word by word teaching of this book on YouTube that was given by Kenshin Rinpoche, who did the translation for this book. So if you're interested in that, you can see that and follow that. But like I said, it's 75 hours. And I was in that, I recorded that actually, and back in 2012. And that's available if anybody wants it.
Is it on the center's YouTube page?
No.
It's not on the. Okay.
If you go looking, I suppose if you put a
I could probably
keyword
find
in
it if I
YouTube, Jewel Ornament Liberation, and then if there's some clarification on that you need, let me know and I'll help dig further on it. I didn't put that on YouTube. Somebody else put that on YouTube.
And the pamphlet with the outline of the jewel ornament, is that something that's on the website? Do you know, or are they sell at the
No,
book?
I have that. I can send that to you.
Cool.
So we have a system. The Dharma is a system, but then there's this like subsystem that is our system. Jigten Dharma Surya Center has a system, and that's what we're trying to put forth. It may not seem like it, but there is a system at work here. So, Gary's been with us for what, 3 years, something like that, 4 years, going on 4 years. And there's been a number of other people. There's a number of people who have been with us like that, who Monday nights now have other things that they need to do, but they still watch our recordings on YouTube and they email me and so on. So there's a number of people who are still following these Monday night sessions when it's more convenient for them to watch. And that's the thing, the Dharma teachings are like a circle. They go round and round, and they get repeated periodically. Some things get repeated every couple months. Some things get repeated every week. Some things get repeated once a year. Some maybe every 4 years. Some maybe every 12 years. But there's this circle, this cycle of teachings that goes round and round. And then as we go through that, we kind of move up to where it's like a spiral. And that spiral then gets tighter. But the circle's going around, and those 12-year teachings we're experiencing there. And then it gets tighter and it goes up until finally it gets to the pinnacle. And the pinnacle is when enlightenment comes. So we have to commit ourselves to the process of going round in the circles and understanding that it's a spiral like that. There's no shortcut. Some of us may have the karma because of past lives, past experience, and so on. We may be further along that spiral than other people. But there's no animosity between those of us that don't have that with those that do have that. And so we need to respect each other. And if people are genuine about that, they are on this cycle for the benefit of others anyway. That's why people who have been doing these practices and attending these teachings over and over again continue to do it, because it becomes a support for other people, for the new people, for other people, our brothers and sisters, and so on. And we support each other. And every time we do these things, we always learn something new, or we remember something that we forgot. So it's never a waste of time. It's our ego that says, "Oh, I don't need that. I'm better than that, man. I got that. I'm a practitioner. I don't need that."
Yeah, it'd be cool to get like a Lamrim like group or something going where everyone's doing this same practices or something. I know I'm someone who like needs some kind of structure, or I'll be on to the next practice in 2 weeks and I'll be going spiraling out.
Well, good. Yeah. And we can do that, but we'll talk about that. We've been doing this for a long time, and it takes committed people to want to do it. Okay. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? Okay. Well, then what I would like to do next, and let me see, I got to cue this up. Excuse me 1 second while I do this. And we've been relating this to deity yoga, to the Manjushri practice. So I want to do that again, because last week we skipped it, and I wanted to make sure that we got to do it this week. Because the more that we do it, the more familiar we become with it, and the subtleties of it become more apparent to us. So if you all can get comfortable, and let's see. Momo, where are you? I thought I just opened this up. Sorry. Where'd that come from? Almost there. Oh, I see. Never mind. My bad. Just a minute. There we go. Okay, so now we go back here, go here. Okay. So now I presume you can see the cover page of the brief practice of Manjushri Janasattva called the Wisdom of Light, right? Okay. So I prostrate to the Guru, inseparable from Manjushri. This is the short practice of the heroic wisdom being. Sit in the proper position, recite the preliminary prayers of refuge and bodhicitta, then meditate in the state of emptiness, free from all dualistic conceptions. So a lot of these words now should have more meaning to you because we've been talking about these things. This book, this Deity Yoga book, I sent to Karina and Gavin. They have it, and I believe that Gary has it, and many of our other one-on-one students have that. And Matthew, I think at some point you may want to get this book because all these different sadhana practices are in here. So this is important to be able to continue on this path. So now we recite. Meditation on all-pervading emptiness. Om Shanyata Jana Bajra Sobhava Atmako Ham. My body, speech, and mind is the indestructible nature of emptiness wisdom. That is a Vajrayana statement. My body, speech, and mind is the indestructible nature of emptiness wisdom. That's Abidharma, what we were just talking about. Now the visualization. From the all-pervading emptiness, a many-colored lotus appears. On the lotus are moon and sun discs, surrounded by an orange-colored mum syllable, the nature of my own awareness wisdom. The luminous syllable radiates colored light in all directions. It is offered to all the Buddhas and purifies all obscurations in the 6 realms. The light returns and is absorbed into the syllables, and I become Manjushri, brilliantly golden in color, with 1 face and 2 arms. So we visualize the all-pervading emptiness, that space that we all come from. This many-colored lotus appears, and then this mum syllable, the nature of my own awareness nature, my own awareness wisdom. And this golden light radiates in all directions, is offered to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and then is absorbed back into the syllables. Then Manjushri, brilliantly golden color, with one face and two arms. My right hand raises the wisdom sword above my shoulder, and my left hand, raised into heart level, holds between the thumb and ring finger the long stem of a lotus that blossoms at my left shoulder. On the lotus is the 100,000 verse Prajnaparamita text. That is the text of emptiness. That is the text of bodhicitta. That is the text of the Mahayana. I am wearing a 5-pointed crown adorned with a blue-black top knot, and am cloaked with silken robes and precious ornaments. Seated in the Vajra position with smiling countenance, I radiate the glorious signs of the Buddhas. At the 3 special places are the white, red, and blue colored lights. White at the forehead, red at the red at the throat, and blue at the heart. Lights radiate from the syllables, inviting the divine wisdom being who dissolves inseparably into me with the syllables Za Hong Bam Ho. So we go back to this image of Manjushri. So his golden body, and he's sitting on the lotus flower, on the moon disk, the sun disk, and in his right hand, he's holding the flaming sword of wisdom in his right hand. In his left hand, he's holding the lotus flower, and on top of the lotus flower is the Prajnaparamita text. So this is the wisdom coming into his left. We receive through the left. It goes round his heart and then goes out through his left arm. And this is our method, our compassion, going out to all beings, cutting through ignorance, cutting through confusion, cutting through dualistic nature. This is the image of Manjushri, and we should visualize ourselves as Manjushri in this position like this. So we say, Za Hong Bam Ho. So we hook to the deity, we tie up to the deity, we lock up to the deity, we chain ourselves to the deity, and we rejoice with the deity. Again, the 3 colored lights radiate and invite the Buddhas of the 5 families to appear in front of me. I offer flowers, incense, light, scented water, nourishing cakes, and music to them. And recite Om Sara Tathagata Abi Kensa Tu Mam. Om, the body, speech, and mind, all the Tathagatas, please grant the Abhishekata Mam. That is the empowerment. By this request, I am empowered by the Buddhas who pour the vase nectar on the crown of my head, filling my whole body with nectar and purifying all the obscurations. The nectar flows at the crown of my head, becoming Buddha Varanchana. The Buddhas of empowerment then dissolve into me. And then we make the offering. So I'm going to stop this for just a second, and we'll come right back to it. So here we're making offerings. So the first offering is drinking water. So we're offering drinking water to the guests who are the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in our heart center. So we're offering drinking water here. So this is called argam. And then we make the offering like this. And we gather the blessings. And we make the second offering, which is padyam, which is washing water. We're washing our feet, washing our face, washing our hands for our guests, providing this water. And then we make the offering for them. Pratitsa, soha. Pratitsa is, I make this offering. Soha, may it be accomplished. Then the next offering is pushpam, is flowers. So we're opening the flowers like this and visualizing that we are giving these flowers to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And we make the offering, pratitsa soha. So that was pushpam, pratitsa soha. Then the next one is dupam. So dupam is the incense. So this is like the incense sticks that are purifying the atmosphere around us. And then we are making this offering, pratitsa soha, dupam, pratitsa soha. Then we make the offerings of light, candlelight. So my thumb is the flame, and my fingers and hand is the candle, or the butter lamp is the lamp, and this is the flame. So we're making this. This is the offering called alokam, alokam. And we make the offering pratitsa soha. And then we make the next offering of gande. Gande is perfume, scented water. So my thumb and my first finger and the palm of my hand is like the bottle, and my other three fingers is like the aroma of the perfume that is evaporating, that is cooling in the heat of the Indian sun. So we make this offering of gande pratitsa soha. And then the next one is food. We're offering nuitea. So this is a tray of food that we're offering. It's a celebration for our guests coming into our home, coming into our heart center. So this is nuitea. And we make the offering pratitsa soha. And then finally, we're making the offering of music. So we're beating a drum. So we're taking our hands like this and we're beating the drum. You see my hands like this. We're beating a drum. And then if we have a bell, we would be, the bell means wisdom, and this means skillful means. This is the feminine, feminine, and this is the masculine. And we're celebrating. We are rejoicing from the offerings that we just made. So those are the offerings. So those are the offerings we just did. Then we come to the long praise. So now we recite this together. His wisdom is brilliant like the sun. We're talking about Manjushri. And Manjushri is with us in our heart center, and we're recognizing it through this deity yoga practice. His wisdom is brilliant like the sun, free of the clouds of the two veils, and perceives the various types of knowledge in their true nature. For this reason, he holds the wisdom text at his heart. He has compassion for all beings who suffer from the darkness of ignorance in the prison of samsara, as a father for an only son. Like a thunderclap, he awakens those who are sleeping in ignorance and loosens the chain of karma through the 60 branches of harmonious speech. He wields the wisdom sword to cut the seedling of suffering and to dispel the darkness of confusion. In the Bodhisattva form, he is pure from beginningless time, fully accomplished in the 10 levels, and perfect in the body of all knowledge. I supplicate you, Manjushri, adorned by the 112 signs of a Buddha, to dispel the darkness of my ignorance. Now the short praise. You who are the perfect youthful body, whose flame of wisdom blazes and dispels the darkness of worldly ignorance, I prostrate before you and praise you, Manjushri. Now the mantra visualization. At the heart chakra, at your heart chakra, is a sun disk on which stands the mum syllable, surrounded by the mantra circling clockwise. So the mum syllable, here is the mum syllable, this yellow, orange mum syllable. So here it is in the Sanskrit, here it is in English, meaning harmonious speech. So at my heart is this at my heart chakra is a sun disk on which stands the mum syllable, surrounded by the mantra circling clockwise in golden light. Light radiates from the mantra, invoking all the blessings and energies of all the Buddhas, which dissolve into the mum syllable. Again, light radiates and transforms the outer universe into the superb Pure Land and purifies all the obscurations of sentient beings, who are then transformed into Manjushri. So now we're seeing the whole entire universe, all the planets, all the solar systems, all the suns, all the galaxies, all the great super galaxies, all of this, all dissolving into light and dissolving into the mum syllable. at our heart center, and then transforming into Manjushri. All this all becomes Manjushri, the youthful wisdom, Bodhisattva of wisdom. All are reciting the mantra together. The light then returns to the seed syllable. And then we recite Om Wagishvari Mam, Om Wagishvari Mam, Om Wagishvari Mam, Om Wagishvari Mam. So we're saying Om, I am the body, speech, and mind, the Lord of speech, of harmonious speech. And the harmonious speech is in the center, that this is, I am the Lord of speech that is radiating and going out to all beings, transforming all beings into Manjushri. And the speech is the wisdom Dharma. Om Wagishvari Mam, 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 Om Wagishvari Mam. Om Wagishvari Mam, 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 Om Wagishvari Mam. Om Wagishvari Mam, 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 Om Wagishvari Mam. Om Wagishvari Mam, 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 Om Wagishvari Mam. Om Wagishvari Mam, 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 Om Wagishvari Mam. Om Wagishvari Mam, Om Wagishvari Mam, Om Wagishvari Mam, Om Wagishvari Mam. Om Wagishvari Mam, 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 Om Wagishvari Mam. Om Wagishvari Mam, 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 Om Wagishvari Mam. Om Wagishvari Mam, 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 Om Wagishvari Mam. Om Wagishvari Mam, 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 Om Wagishvari Mam. Om Wagishvari Mam, 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 Om Wagishvari Mam. Om Wagishvari Mam, 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 Om Wagishvari Mam. Om Wagishvari Mam, 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 Om Wagishvari Mam. Om Wagishravimam, Om Wagishravimam, Om Wagishravimam, Om Wagishravimam. We return to our book. We recite the mantra as many times as possible without the 6 faults. And then we recite the dissolution. The outer universe dissolves into light, which is absorbed into myself. I then dissolve into the mum syllable, which dissolves from the bottom to the top nada, gradually becoming emptiness. I meditate in the bliss of non-duality of subject and object. So here we visualize the mum syllable, and at the top of this bindu is a nada, is a flame. So it began from the emptiness, and now it returns into the emptiness. This dissolves into that flame and dissolves into the emptiness. And we meditate in the bliss of non-duality of subject and object. So close your eyes, do a short dissolution meditation, visualizing the emptiness. Take a deep breath and hold it. Keep your back straight. Exhale. Hold that breath. Relax. Breathe normal. Open your eyes. And then once again, I assume the form of Manjushri. So now on this cushion, I become Manjushri, and I will try and remain in Manjushri for this next hour, for the evening, for our sleep, for tomorrow. So now we recite the dedication prayers. By the light of your wisdom, compassionate one, may the darkness of ignorance in my mind be dispelled. To realize all the sutras and commentaries, please grant me the power of radiant wisdom. Whenever I want to see you to clarify or want you to clarify my confusion, Lord Manjushri Goka, may I have a clear vision of you without hindrance. You, Manjushri, have performed great deeds to the furthest limit of the 10 directions for the benefit of all sentient beings. May I and others perform the same activities. Okay. So that is the sadhana practice. We still have the dedication to do. Does anybody have any comments or questions that you'd like to talk about right now? Okay. Is this making any sense? Are some of the pieces starting to fit together?
I had a comment. It goes back to the epiphany I had when we were talking about slow water and then things slowing energy down. And I remember there's a mathematician, his name is William Carthy, and he said that the speed of light slows down as it enters the Earth's atmosphere to 144,000 miles a second. And that number's written in the book of Revelations and all this crazy number. And then I started thinking like, well, life on Earth in the light body has something to do with how the speed of light has been slowed down, at least on this planet. So then the question of, how fast does light travel on Mars or Venus, and what type of light takes an evolution on those planets to become sentient in that stage of light's travel from the star into the solar system and abroad. Anyways, it's like an epiphanal explosion in my mind of the light body of Earth beings and how Earth beings incarnate on this celestial object that's sentient herself.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and we say that there is a language of light, and in that meditation that we attain, whatever language we've been speaking, English, Spanish, whatever it is, all goes away. But the truth becomes that light, that language of light. So this is what we're doing, is we're familiarizing ourselves with that, and that there are many references as we learn about the deity yoga, that each of those deities has light, and to be able to recognize that in the meditation mind.
Yes, indeed. It's very, very interesting.
Yes.
It-
And time stops. There's no time.
Yeah.
Time is a relative concept.
Yeah.
Location is a relative concept.
Yes, I have an experience like this before.
Yes.
Beautiful, divine moment.
And you can feel yourself vibrating. That's
Yeah.
why reciting the mantra out loud and powerfully sets up your vibration, and we're harmonizing with the vibration that we are all part of. That vibration is like the tantra, is that continuum, that practice that we are all part of.
Yes.
To begin to recognize it in those terms and realize that those terms are just temporary terms, but they help us to recognize something that is beyond just ordinary intellectual human beings.
Mm.
Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions or comments? So we see that it's the deity yoga that takes us from being a human being, an ordinary human being, to become a transcendent human being. And a transcendent human being is the Bodhisattva on the path, ultimately to become the Buddha. The Buddha is the goal, is a self-realized human being with this ultimate wisdom, this relative wisdom. Everything that we're talking about becomes the embodiment of the Buddha. Okay. So now I'd like to do the dedication prayer on page 21 of our 101 prayer book, the dedication prayer by Lord Jigten Sumgon. So last week we got halfway through it, the explanation. So I would like to start it over at the beginning and then pick it up for the explanation as we get to that point. So I'll screen share it. Okay, so this is the dedication prayer by Lord Jigten Sumgon. And Lord Jigten Sumgon is the founder of this lineage, the Jigten lineage, that is over 800 years old now, of an unbroken lineage. So here we pay homage to the masters who have come before. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis, dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all sentient beings, and samsara and nirvana, in the innate word of virtue, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Sravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mothers sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras, and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, concern, and wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. So now I go back to this page here. So we left off right about here, where it says, may all mothers sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras, and the hordes of demons. So we're sending this out. We're dedicating this to all beings, especially those who want to do harm to me and my family, my friends, those that I consider dear to me. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, their suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. So may they experience Buddhahood, that everything I do is for their benefit, for the sake of their experiencing enlightenment. My enlightenment comes by way of doing that. This is the pure enlightenment. The enlightenment that we talked about a little while ago about the arhats or the shravakas, that was a temporary enlightenment. That was a shallow enlightenment, just for oneself, just for selfishness' sake. This enlightenment here that we are talking about is for all beings, that all beings attain Buddhahood. All beings have Buddha nature within themselves. And we recognize that, and we endeavor to be able to enable all beings to recognize that for themselves. Then there will be peace. That will be the end of samsara for all beings. So then it says, by the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. So this vast root of virtue is this practice that we did, is this teaching that we received, is the meditation that we engaged in. This is the root of virtue. This is where we transform ourselves from being non-virtuous to being virtuous by way of these deeds that we just did. May I benefit beings through my body, speech, and mind, the action bodhicitta. Whoops. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. Is this not what we talked about weeks before, and we continue to talk about as the 5 poisons that make up the 84,000 emotions, these afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy. The arrogance would be like the greed, the pridefulness. May the attachment that we have now, the results of those afflictions is fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May we be not controlled like a ring through our nose, being enslaved, being pulled away to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life. Instead of that, may we have peace. May we have bliss. May we be happy and satisfied. Have equanimity and Mahamudra in the meditation mind, in bodhicitta. Then, may my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta. So my mind stream, what it is that I'm thinking, and my mind stream now is totally involved, not just with the brain, but with the heart mind. So the mind stream, the brain mind and the heart mind now becoming one. Be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta. And through that, may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. So as we do that, we become a practitioner. We become a yogi. We become a yogini. We become a bodhisattva, and ultimately we become a Buddha, a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space that is beyond human comprehension. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May I become enlightened in this very life, not the next life, not 5 lives down the road, not 1,000 lives down the road. In this life, may I work for that perfection now. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. That we perfect ourselves now. Each meditation is a rehearsal for what we call death. When we enter into a practice, when we enter into a meditation, we are entering in with a set of body, speech, and mind, preconceived ideas, all this stuff. But then that practice, then that meditation, then can clean all that away. We can transcend all that we take into that practice, and that we emerge reborn, enlightened than we were when we started. So each time we practice is a death and a rebirth. And we need to look at that. We need to embrace that. We need to practice every day thinking that this is what we are doing. We are purifying ourselves with every single practice, so that whether we're reborn now or we're reborn at the time when we drop our bodies, we've been preparing for that when we drop our bodies by doing these practices. May I not die with negative thoughts. May everything be virtuous. May everything be happy. May I be thinking about good things for other people. May I not die with negative thoughts. It be positive. May I not die confused by wrong view, thinking that I am the only one, thinking that I know that I am a human being, and by being a human being, I can have all this wisdom. The thing is to become a transcendent human being. Not just an ordinary human being, but a transcendent human being, to the point where we realize that ordinary human being is a transcendent human being. That's the ordinariness. We have been fooling ourselves all this time, thinking that with all these choices, all these emotions, that we are the best that we can be. But that's not true. The best that we can be is peaceful and happy and serene, with far less complication than we have now, much more simple. So may I not die confused by wrong view. Our practices, our teachings help us to develop that, to recognize that wrong view, to be able to have discriminating awareness. That was what we talked about as the Abidharma, as the Vajrayana teachings. that third basket of teachings. May I not experience an untimely death. Who knows when we're going to die? Nobody knows. Time stands still. It doesn't matter when it is. It can be 5 minutes from now. It can be 5 years from now. It's all the same. It doesn't matter. And if we're trying to hold on to the time of death, when am I going to die? And I'm worried about dying and everything, then that's an attachment that will enslave us. We need to liberate from that. We need to be free of that. It doesn't matter. We're always going through a birth and a death. We are different than we were 2 hours ago by virtue of these teachings that we've had and the practice that we've done. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I die, may my body, speech, and mind, may my body and my intellect and my body pass away happily and joyfully in the great luminosity of my heart mind, my spirituality. The mind as such, recognizing that this is what we have to recognize, that, and that this all-pervading clarity of Dharmata. Dharmata is this field of the pure Dharma, of the pure way of peace and bliss. So when we recite this, we can say, may the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. No, we don't want that. May I not die with negative thoughts. No, I don't want that. May I not die confused by wrong view. No, I don't want that. May I not experience an untimely death. No, I don't want that. But may I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such, and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. So may we have a smile on our face. And may we be looking at that death as a moment of liberation from this suffering, from this samsara, in order that we may be reborn as a Buddha, as a Bodhisattva, in another life to help other beings, or to take our form, or not our form, but to take our life as a pure spiritual being, not to be born in this ocean of suffering. Then we say, may I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. So what that means is that even if we don't realize these things that we've been talking about just these couple minutes now, about the mind of Mahamudra and so on, may we experience this when we die. We do experience it when we die. It's a question of whether we're prepared to recognize it or not. That's what we're trying to do. We've died many times and we've been born many times. And to recognize that, to have the remembrance of those cycles, through the practice of meditation, we begin to have those remembrances. We begin to have that awareness of that. All this fades away, that dualistic nature just fades away. So we do that at the time of death or in the bardo. And in the bardo means the intermediate state. We're in an intermediate state right now. We are in the intermediate state of living. Then we go through the intermediate state of death. Then we go through the intermediate state of reality. And then if we're not satisfied, if we're not prepared to remain in reality, then we want to become another being. So we go through the intermediate state of becoming another being. And it's our karma that determines what that other being will be. During this bardo of living, we also have our bardo of dreams. We have the intermediate bardo of dreams. And this is involuntary, but it's like a window into that bardo of reality, into that intermediate state of reality, that we see that, and it's all very symbolic. And we need to have a key, an understanding of how to recognize the meaning of those dreams. But again, the Dharma practices help us to do that. and then to liberate ourselves from that. And then in that bardo of living, we also have the bardo of meditation. The bardo of meditation is very controlled. We are in control of the meditation. We are learning to control our mind. The bardo of dreams, we have very little control, no control. But in the bardo of meditation, it is all in control. And that's what we're developing, to control that, so that we are developing the bardo of reality and bring that back into the bardo of living. Bring it back so that we become living Buddhas. We become living enlightened beings with all the activities of an enlightened being. So this is the dedication prayer by Lord Jigten Sumgon. It is very comprehensive, as you can see and hear, and to be practiced, it's very, very powerful. So I hope that helps. So that completes our one-on-one session for tonight. Tomorrow next week we will continue. It will be our last night for this 8-week cycle. And then after that, then we are going to start a new cycle. And in that new cycle, the first night of that new cycle, I'm going to give the story of Buddha Shakyamuni. So a lot of pieces are going to fit into place when you hear that story, if you don't already know.
Thank you, Lance. You made me think about life on Earth and the sentient beings as different states of water. And the water will evaporate and reallocate into the atmosphere. And once the water recognizes it doesn't want to be water, perhaps it goes into a different state of water and becomes an element, like a crystal, and arranges its atoms into a more perfect state.
That's very good. Yes, you're right. You're correct.
Well, thank you for your wise metaphors.
Well, you're welcome. And they're just being carried on through us all. And we're sharing them. And may you become a great spiritual master yourself and experience these and carry this on to your students.
Yes, sir.
And likewise, all of you the same.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, Om, Ah, Om, Om, Ah, Om, Om, Ah, Om. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lance.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Extra.
All right.
Lance, can I get your email address maybe, or I don't know what the best way to get in contact with you is.
Sure. The best thing would be the simplest one is Lance, Lance,
Yes.
I'm gonna want
302
You take this trash?
at msn.com.
Okay. Lance302 at msn.com.
302, yes.
302. Awesome. Thank you so much. Would it be okay if I emailed you to see about maybe some of the things that you had mentioned?
Absolutely. Please do.
Thank you so much, and thanks for teaching us, Lance.
Okay. And you're in Virginia, right?
Yeah, I live like right next to the center, across the
Well,
street, basically.
I'll be there tomorrow if you have
cool.
opportunity. And
Yeah, I think I might be able
plan
to
on
go.
being there Saturday. So if you have opportunity to be there, I can hand you the things that you need in person.
Cool. Yeah. Hopefully, I'm planning on trying to get over there unless something comes up. But yeah, that'd be cool to see you there.
Okay.
All right. Good night, Joe.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Karina and Gavin, you guys drive careful the rest of your trip home. And I look forward to seeing you before too long.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Good night.
Okay, thank you. Good night.